We're going to start with our forearms stacked, so one forearm on top of the other, creating a little pillow for your forehead. So rest your forehead on your forearms. And start with your feet. If you have a mat distance apart. If you don't, just think of your feet being wider than your hips. And go ahead and close your eyes. With every class, we'll always start with a focus of the breath. Gives us a moment to kind of pause to transition into the practice. So allowing yourself just a moment to kind of let go. And letting go of whatever events brought you to this moment. So whether it be your usual morning routine or whatever you read or heard, just taking a moment to let that go. And shifting your awareness to your body and feeling the parts of your body that connect to the earth, the floor, the ground. And scanning your body to notice if there's areas that you're holding tension. And maybe if the arms are stacked too close together, you feel tension in your shoulders. So if you need to make adjustments, maybe taking the elbows wider so that you can soften your shoulders a little bit more, allow that to happen. Notice where else you might feel tension and gripping, your hips, your neck, your jaw, your tongue. And in this position, you'll feel that your belly connects to the earth. So bring your awareness into your belly. And notice with each breath what happens. So hopefully as you inhale, you feel your belly expanding towards the ground. And as you exhale, you feel this slight drawing in of the belly and this kind of awareness that the belly lifts slightly off the floor. And on Tuesday, we talked about feeling the complete exhalation. So just notice again, if you know that you end your exhalation before it's completely empty. And see if you can transition to fully emptying out your belly. And as you fully empty out, notice what happens to the navel. You might feel this drawing of the navel a little bit more away from the floor. You might notice that there's a connection between your breath and core engagement. Keeping the awareness on the breath, allow it to shift to how the breath translates into your back. And so both as you inhale, feeling the back and side ribs expand. And what happens at the bottom of the exhalation. So you feel this corseting end around the entire front, back, and sides. At the bottom of the exhalation, and this filling up as you inhale. So throughout the class, I'll bring awareness back to the breath from time to time. Bring your feet together. So the inner thighs together, the knees together, the feet together. Keep your left foot pressing into the floor and bend your left knee to 90 degrees. Flex your left ankle, so reaching the toes towards the floor. And continue to press your knees and thighs together. So if you don't feel yourself actively doing that, then actively do it. So press knee and inner thigh together. On Tuesday, we explored external rotation. Today, we're going to explore internal rotation, but we'll move through both. So for internal rotation, keep your knees together and take your foot out to the right. So as if you were trying to take the outer edge of your foot towards the floor to the right, but keep your hips on the ground. And then take the foot to the left, bringing your shin to touch your inner left thigh. And then open back out, so foot comes out to the side. Keep squeezing the inner thighs together. As you exhale, take the foot to the left. Just continue to move the foot out to the side, to the right, and into the middle, to the left. Kind of exploring the range of motion of internal and external rotation in your hip. But the whole time, trying to keep your inner thighs glued together. The ankle is flexed. And the next time you take your foot out, take it out and leave it there. Try to glue your knees together and try to push your outer edge of your foot towards the floor. And just notice what you feel. So this is internal rotation of the hip. It's confusing because the foot is turning out, but the hip is turning in, so the knee is turning in. Bring it back to center and release the right foot down. Bend your left knee 90 degrees. Flex your ankle strongly, so toes pulling down towards the floor. Glue your inner thighs together. And keep your hips on the floor and just take your left foot, outer edge of the foot, towards the floor. And bring it back in, taking your shin towards your right thigh, but keeping the knees together. And then again, start to explore the range of motion, taking the foot out to the left and in to the right. So as you move through this range of motion, notice the pelvis, the hip points. They stay on the floor. So all of the movement is coming in the hip joint rather than the pelvis shifting side to side. The inner thighs stay joined. And then the next time you take the foot out to the left, stop there. Glue your inner thighs together. And push the outer edge of the left foot down. Notice the want of your right hip to come off the floor and resist it down. And notice what you feel going on in your legs, the upper legs, the hips. Make sure you're still breathing, following that exhalation all the way out. Notice if you felt a difference right side to left side. And then bring it back and bring both legs down. Separate your feet mat distance apart again and just shift your hips side to side. So allow all of that hip work to go. Jiggling side to side. And lift up onto your elbows and come onto your left side. So you can use your hand to support your head. You're gonna bend the knees to 90 degrees, but keep your knees in line with your hips. So instead of them coming forward, try to keep your knees, your hip, and your shoulder all in one line. So this is gonna kind of force us to use the core a little bit. If you do feel instability, you can bring the knees forward a little bit at a time, but see how in one line you can stay. Bring your right hand to your hip and make sure your hip is stacked. Keep your knees together, flex your ankles, and then lift your right foot up. Knees glue together. Bring it down. Open right foot up towards the sky. Bring it down. And keep doing this. So imagine with the navel, you're trying to peel it off the floor again, as we did when we first breathed. That full exhalation coming out. Notice how that stabilizes, keeping the hip above the other hip. The next time you lift your foot, pause there. And then separate your knees. Bring them together. So the right foot's still reaching up towards the sky as you lift your knees apart. The left foot is pressing into the floor for balance. Lift, open, hold. Keep lifting the foot up towards the sky. Keep balancing pelvis on top of the other. Bring the knees back together and switch to the other side. So roll on to your right side. Use your hand as a pillow. And trying to align your knees, your hip, and your shoulder in one line. Knees bent to 90 degrees, left hand to the hip. Imagine trying to peel the belly off the floor as you exhale. Keep that tone and just open, keeping your knees together. Lift your left foot up. Bring the feet together. And just keep doing this. Now, what I notice is that it is a lot harder for me to lift my left foot off my right foot than it is for me to lift my right foot off my left foot. And I can kind of tell which muscles are trying to work because they're shaking a lot to create this action. Lift it up and hold. Glue your knees together, tone your lower belly, and then lift the knee apart. And touch the knees together. Try to keep the foot high and lift. So just notice what you feel going on in your hips. Notice what you feel going on in your legs and where you feel all this going on. And where it's working really hard in order to make these actions happen. Lift and hold. Tone the belly. Bring it together. And come up onto hands and knees. Bring your big toes to touch, knees slightly wide. Hands walk far forward. Look between your hands and reach your hips back. And sit your hips back towards your heels, forehead to the floor in child's pose. And perhaps you can feel we've done some work already. So just allowing a moment to let that go so we can work it a little bit more. And when you're ready, shift forward to tabletop. And we're going to start on elbows to give you, so you're not on your wrists for a long time. If it helps to clasp your fingers to make one fist for stabilization, you can do that. But your elbows are directly under your shoulders and your knees are directly under your hips. They might be slightly behind your hips. Bring your knees together. Kick your right heel towards your hip. And that same action we did while on our belly, see if you can create that same action while on your knees. So turning the foot in and out, but noticing the feeling in your hip socket, so where the leg bone attaches to your pelvis. So we're going into internal rotation when the foot goes out, external rotation when the foot comes in. And keep the foot out and come up onto your hands. Flex the ankle, so draw your toes towards your shins. Spread your hands or your fingers so your hands are wide. Push your right knee into your left knee. Keep turning the foot out. And then with the foot out, lift the knee off the ground. Notice that your right hip point continues to point towards the floor. So we're staying in that internal rotation. Foot is pressing towards the floor as inner thigh is rolling up towards the sky. And if you get a cramp in your hamstring, that's totally normal. From here, straighten the leg back, but keep rolling the inner thigh up towards the sky. So allowing the hip to remain pointing towards the floor. There's a tendency when we come into this to open up. Resist that by finding that same awareness of the inner thigh. And bring the knees together. Shift back and bring your right foot forward. So your left hip is directly over your left knee, and your right knee is directly over your right ankle. So 90-degree bend in both knees, and pelvis is in neutral. So bring your fingertips to your hip points. So the hip points are those bony points. If you bring your fingers forward, you find them. So keep your fingers on your hip points. Look down at your right foot, and stay where you are. I'm going to show you what you're looking at. Ball mount to the big toe, inner heel. Pinky toe, outer heel. So point 1 is ball mount of the big toe, point 2 is inner heel, point 3 is pinky toe, point 4, outer heel. So look down at your right foot, hand on the pelvis. Press the ball mount of your big toe, point 1, into the floor. So press it down. And then imagine you could drag it back to your inner heel. So the inner edge of your foot is staying on the floor but dragging back. And notice where you feel that translate into your leg, into your inner thigh. Keep the awareness of the inner edge of your foot and press the ball mount of your big pinky toe down. And drag that heel back. So your right foot is dragging back. Notice what starts to happen in your left knee. You might feel this tractioning forward of the left knee. Bring your right thumb into your hip crease and pull the hip crease down. So that aligns the 2 points of your hip points. Keep dragging back with your right foot. Keep pushing forward with your left knee. Take your hand to your left buttocks and squeeze, not with your hand, so don't squeeze your butt, but squeeze the muscles of your butt, so your glute muscles. So you're pushing down with your feet and knee, dragging and squeezing your glutes and pulling the hip down. Release that. Bring your hands on either side of your right foot. If you have blocks, you can use blocks in order to get more length in your hamstring. But start to wiggle your toes forward. And when you start to feel a pull on your hamstring, just pause there. Press down through the ball mount of your big toe. Drag through your inner heel. Pinky toe, outer heel drag. Draw the right hip crease down. And just hold here. you might feel a lot of action going on in the back of your leg. That's good. And then if you can, let it go and see if you can walk your foot forward a little bit more. And again, when you start to feel the hamstring really short, pause there. Press through the ball mount of your big toe. Drag through your inner heel. Pinky toe. Drag through your outer heel. Draw the right hip crease down. And you might feel some sense of your left knee pressing forward. Notice where you might be tensing in your jaw and your tongue, and let that go. And then release and see if you can walk your foot forward. And if you can't, just stay wherever you can with your current range of motion. If you can straighten your leg, flex your ankle and pull your toes towards your shin. If your foot is still on the floor, ball mount big toe, inner heel, pinky toe, outer heel. If your heel is on the ground, press the heel into the ground and scrape it back. Make sure your right front hip crease is pulling down. And the more you pull your toes towards the shin, if you can flex your ankle, the more you're going to feel your right quad engage. Release that, so bring both knees to the ground. Big toes touch, sit the hips back towards the heels. And just notice the difference between your right and left leg, hip. All right. Other side, shift forward to tabletop. We're going to start on elbows, so bring your elbows to the ground. Clasp your fingers together to make one fist. Shoulders above your elbows. Bring your knees together. Bend your left heel towards your hip. You can keep your toe pointed and just bring it through that internal and external rotation. So turning the foot in and out to the side. And feeling where the leg bone, the top of your femur or the top of your thigh bone, where that rotates inside the hip socket. And notice that the pelvis is staying still. And all of the movement is happening in the rotation of the bone in the hip joint. Turn the foot out and come up to your hands. Flex your ankle, so pulling the toes towards your shin. Keeping your knees together, so squeeze to find your inner thigh muscles. And then lift your left leg back, still pulling the foot towards the floor. Touch knee to knee. Lift the leg up and feel how the inner thigh muscles are doing the work to lift the leg. Lift. So continue to do that a couple of times, just with an awareness of that the pelvis, the hip points, stay pointing towards the floor. So you're not opening the left hip to lift the left knee. Next time you lift, hold. Really turn the foot towards the floor. Feel the inner thigh muscle engage. And then from that, straighten the leg back. And when that happens, the toes will turn towards the floor. Hopefully your left hip point continues to square down towards the floor. And imagine rolling your inner thigh up towards the sky more. Release both knees to the floor. Come up to the knees and step your left foot forward. Pause. Make sure right hip is directly over right knee. And left heel is directly under left knee. Bring your left thumb into your hip crease, pull it down. Look down at your left foot. Press through the ball mount of your big toe and drag it towards your left inner heel. You might automatically feel the front of your right thigh engage as your knee pushes forward. And find the pinky edge of your left foot, press it down, drag the heel back. So notice when your awareness is more on your inner edge of your foot, where does it move up the chain? So where does it move in your thigh? Where does it move in your hip? And then when your awareness is in your outer edge, where do you feel that in your thigh and left hip? And bring your right hand to your buttocks, squeeze the butt muscles. And see if you can keep that awareness of your pelvis staying in neutral. And remove your hands. So front foot's dragging back. Right knee's dragging forward. You might feel a lot of things going on here. You might feel some things going on in the outer hip and in the inner thigh. So all of these muscles are what work to stabilize the pelvis. And oftentimes when we have low back pain or hip pain, it's not because muscles are tight. I mean, muscles are tight, but it's more because some of these other muscles that are feeling a little foreign to you right now haven't been working. Release. Bring your hands on either side of your left foot. Walk your toes a little further forward. So keeping the right hip over the right knee, see how far you can walk your toes forward until you start to feel a big stretch in your left hamstring, the back thigh muscle. And then look down at your left foot. Ball mount to the big toe, drags back through inner heel. Feel that translation up your leg and into your hip. Pinky toe, drag. Feel that translation up your outer thigh, hip, maybe hamstring. Keep that awareness of dragging back. So this is a principle called contract relax. You contract a muscle as you lengthen it in order to create a release. So let it go. And then hopefully you can walk your toes a little further forward. And if not, just stay where you are. Big toe, inner heel drag. Pinky toe, outer heel drag. Draw the left hip crease towards the floor to keep the pelvis in neutral. Keep that awareness of pressing down and dragging back. And hopefully you feel your hamstring. Release that. Walk your foot a little further forward. If you can straighten your leg, do so. If not, just stay where you are. And if you can straighten your leg, flex your ankle and draw your shin towards your toes towards your shin. The more you draw your toes towards your shin, the more the quad engages. Press the heel or the foot down and drag back. Left hip crease drawing down. You might feel the right knee pushing forward. And I love this simple work because it shows me my weaknesses. And my left leg is so much weaker than my right leg. Release. Bring the knees back to the floor. Separate the knees, wider than hips, toes to touch. Walk the hands forward, look between the thumbs as you stretch the hips back towards your heels, and then lower your forehead to the floor. And pause to notice what you feel. Okay, shift forward to tabletop. And then come up to standing. Shake out the legs. And we're gonna do Tadasana. We're gonna spend some time in Tadasana. Tadasana is mountain pose, and it's standing. And standing seems like such a simple thing for us to do, but standing is also how a lot of problems in our bodies. Postural habits cause postural problems. So starting with the outer edges of your feet parallel. So aligning the outer edges of your feet with your mat. Feet about hip distance apart or sit bone distance apart. Bring your hands to your hips and look down at your feet. And rock feet out and in. And start by exaggerating this, so rocking to the outer edges of your feet and to the inner edges of your feet. And just kind of notice what feels more comfortable to you. This is going to teach you a lot about your postural habits. For example, I could rock on the outer edges of my feet and stay there and be really comfortable. Inner edges, not so much. But we're all different, so just notice that. And then switch that and rock forward and back. So balls of your toes, heels. And again, as you're rocking forward and back, notice what feels more natural to you. And just make a note of that. And then again, look down at your feet and notice if your outer edges have come out of alignment, bring them back. And lift your toes completely off the floor. And as you lift your toes off the floor, feel where that translates up your legs. So as your toes point up, you might feel some engagement of the front of your thighs, your quads. And oftentimes you'll hear me say, lift and hug the muscles to your bones. This is the sensation that I want you to create. In this position, you should feel that the 4 points of your feet press firmly into the floor. And you should also feel that your pelvis is in neutral, right? So we can't dip the hip points forward or back because everything's engaged. So just notice how the 4 points grounding down creates that sense of stability and neutrality. Then look back at your toes, hands on your hips. Try to bring just your big toes to the floor. All the other toes lifted. This takes lots of practice, but it also teaches us a lot about our tendencies. If you have your big toes in the ground, keep all the other toes lifted and try to stretch your pinky toes out and bring just your pinky toes down. And notice what your toes do. For example, my left toes, which is interesting because that's my left leg, they want to curl up. My right toes stay spread. And then spread the toes as you bring them all down. Keep that awareness of the legs. And then stack your shoulders above your hips. Allow your arms to come down beside you. And see if you can ground into the 4 points and keep the legs active. So this is mountain pose Tadasana. And when we're in this position, you should feel like a mountain, very strong. Externally rotate your arms away from your body. Feel that open across your collarbones, and then bring your arms over your head. Notice if your ribs want to flare open and knit the lower ribs together, or think of a corset drawing your lower ribs together. Good. Have you lost the sense of your legs? Arms super straight. So palms don't have to touch. I want your arms straight. So reach up through your outer armpits. And notice if you've lost anything in your legs. Find the 4 points of your feet, ground down. Cross your wrists, bend your knees, and bring your hands between your knees. Look down at your feet. Ball mounts of the big toes press down. Inner heels drag back as your knees press into your hands. Keep that awareness. Kevin, bring your toes in more. There you go. Keep that awareness of the inner edges of your feet and drag your outer edges of your feet back. And see where that translates into your hips. Bring your fingertips to your hip creases. Push them back to push the hips back more and bend your knees forward. Inner edges of your feet draw back. Outer edges of your feet draw back. Keep pulling your hip creases back as you straighten your legs. And you don't have to straighten them fully. So you can keep the knees bent. but see how far you can bend. And then bring your hands either to the floor, bring your hands to the floor, bending your knees as much as you need. Let your head hang. Notice what's going on in your legs, your hips. And then come down onto your knees. Are you feeling things in your legs? We're not doing a whole lot, but we're doing a whole lot. So downward facing dog is another pose that you see in yoga a lot. And the same action that we just created in mountain pose is the same thing we want to create in downward facing dog. So I'm going to show you first how we're going to move into downward facing dog. We're going to start in child's pose. We'll shift forward to tabletop. We're going to take the feet wide. So we did a little bit of this before. We're going to do this a couple of times where we keep our knees together and just lift them off the floor. And we'll bring the feet back to neutral. And then as if you were going to go back to child's pose, but the knees lift. And we'll pause here. And we'll push back as much as we can, as if you were going to rest your belly on your thighs. And from there, we'll lift the hips first, belly still on the thighs. And then straighten knees as we can. So, come forward, tabletop. Knees are about hip distance apart. Start by pressing your hips as you look forward to find your child's pose. Forehead to the floor. Walk your hands as far towards the front of the room or towards the front of your mat if you're using a mat. The elbows will lift off the floor, so arms are super straight. You're going to find this lengthening of your side body. And as you inhale, keep your hands where they are, keep your knees where they are, and just come up into a tabletop. It's going to be a longer tabletop than you're used to. And bring your knees together. Take your feet wide, tuck your toes under. Squeeze your inner thighs together, and just lift your knees off the floor. Squeeze your knees together, lower down. Keep your knees together, lift your knees, hover. Lower the knees down. One more time. So feel the action of the inner thighs, rolling back. Drop the knees to the floor. Take your feet and your knees hip distance apart. Don't move your hands, don't move your feet. Press your hips back as if you're going back into child's pose. Toes stay tucked under, lift the knees, keep pressing the hands forward, head looking towards your feet, and start to work towards straightening your legs. Good, and I can't really see them, but I want you to watch me again. So come down to hands and knees. So when I'm in this position, notice that my wrist and my shoulder and my hip are all in one line, right? So it doesn't look like this. The number one thing that you want to think of in downward facing dog is keeping your spine long. So I'm going to show you what I normally see people do in downward facing dog when they first start to do downward facing dog. And then I'm going to show you how to work that out. So a lot of times people think that the knees have to be straight. I don't care about your hamstrings right now. I care more about the spine and that hip, shoulder, and wrist alignment. So this is how I see people do dog a lot. because they think they need to get their heels to the ground and the legs straight. And they don't have the hamstring straight length or the spinal length to do that. So if this is your dog, you're going to bend the knees, press your belly back towards your thighs, look at your feet. My feet continue to look, or I continue to look at my feet the whole time, and you can see wrist, shoulder, hip are all in one line. And maybe this is where you start your dog, with your belly resting completely on your thighs, but you're getting that spinal length. You might be able to lift and notice my tailbone is what's going up. I'm not doing this. My tailbone and my sit bones are lifting. Does that make sense? So come down onto hands and knees. From child's pose, make sure the hands are as far towards the front of the mat, so stretching your side body long. Spread your fingers apart. Keep your knees and your hands where they are. Shift forward into tabletop. Tuck your toes under. Start to press your hips back as if you were going into child's pose, and then lift the knees. Look at your feet. Keep pushing your head towards your feet as you lift your hips up towards the sky. Keep looking at your feet and keep pressing your hips towards the sky. Good. Release. How did that feel? You can ask questions later. All right, so downward facing dog. Come back up, standing. So start at the front of your mat. I'm going to move here so you can see what we're doing. So bring your hands to your hips. Oops. And find your fingertips on your hip points. Find your 4 points of your feet in the floor, and your feet can be hip distance apart. Outer edges of your feet parallel. And Kevin, you tend to point out, so really think of tires, like the treads of tires. And if we turn like this, the outer edges of our feet are wearing down, which means our hips and our knees also are wearing down. So just notice your tendency and move more towards neutral. So fingertips on your hip points. Shift your weight onto your right foot and bend your left knee forward. Notice if this hip pops out, and think of your foot, inner edge, pull back, outer edge, pull back. Notice what that does to your pelvis. And then lift your left knee out in front. Take your hand, your left hand to your inner knee. Keep the awareness of the 4 points of the foot on the floor. Flex your left ankle. And then push your hand and your knee together. As you do that, think of drawing your inner inseam of your pant leg towards your pubic bone. Bring your hand to your hip. And you're going to step your left foot to the back of your mat. Lower your left knee all the way down to the ground. Walk your right foot forward so that now your left hip is slightly forward of your left knee. Bring your right hand to your inner right knee and create that same awareness, knee pressing in and inner thigh drawing back. You'll feel the left knee start to slide forward. Bring the arms over your head. Keep pressing through your right foot and dragging it back, pushing your left knee forward. Wrapping your outer right hip towards the ground. Bring your hands to your hips. Tuck your left toe under. Find your inner left thigh. Think of that lifting of your back leg up when we were in tabletop. And see if you can lift your back leg off the ground. Rolling your inner left thigh up towards the sky. Good. Right hand inside of right knee. Take your left hand behind and place it on your outer hip. And use it to kind of drag your hip back as you press the knee towards midline. Bring both hands down to the floor. Bring the knee to the ground. Knees together. Walk the hands forward as you sit the hips back. Child's pose. Walk the fingers further forward. Shift forward into tabletop. Tuck the toes under. Lift the knees off the floor as you press the hips towards the heels. Look at your feet. And as you continue to look at your feet, move towards straightening your legs. The upper body stays where it is. So if you feel that shift forward, bend your knees and stay where you need to stay. Release the knees to the floor. And come back up to standing. So again, we're starting at the front of the mat. I'm going to turn so you can see me. Shift the weight onto your left foot. Outer edges of your feet parallel. Bend the right knee forward. Notice where you drop automatically. Inner edge of your left foot. Outer edge of your left foot. Feel that translate into your hip. Pelvis stays in neutral as you lift. Right leg forward. Bring your right hand inside of your right knee and press. As you press the hand and knee together, draw the inseam of your inner thigh towards your groin. Notice the 4 points of your left foot. Notice which leg you can balance on more. And then hands to hip. Step. Right foot to the back of your mat. Lower the knee to the ground. And walk the left foot slightly forward. Left thumb in your hip crease, draw it down. Keep that awareness of the hip drawing down, so outer edge of the foot presses down, draws back. Feel that translation into the hip. And then left hand inside of your left knee and press. So notice the 4 points of the feet, inner edge, outer edge, drag. Lift the arms over the head. Make sure you're breathing, that exhalation is complete. Notice how this hip wants to let go. Keep it active by pressing into the outer edge and dragging back. And bring your hands back to your hips. Tuck your back toe under. Think of the inner thigh lifting towards the sky to lift the back leg. And then find the ball mount, inner edge of the foot, pinky toe outer edge. Feel that wrap the hip down. Arms over the head. Keep lifting the inner right thigh towards the sky. Bring the hands on either side of the front foot. Knees to the ground. Big toes touch. Knees separate, look forward, send the hips back, walk the hands forward, child's pose. And inhale, shift forward, keep the hands and knees where they are. Bring the knees a little narrower. Tuck the toes under. Lift the knees off the floor. Press the hips back, belly towards thigh, look at your feet, straighten your knees. Or lift the hips. Move towards straightening the knees without losing the length of your spine. Release knees to the ground and come into a seated position. So I did a lot of internal rotation. As you can tell with internal rotation, that also means that the outer hips are working in order to stabilize the pelvis. So for our ending postures, closing postures, we're gonna do some external rotation. So Baddha Konasana is soles of the feet together. And take your feet as far forward as is comfortable. Bring your hands, fingertips to the floor, behind your hips, and press down to lengthen the spine. Notice where you might be gripping unintentionally, which most likely is the outer hips because we worked them a lot. Maybe the inner thighs because we worked those a lot. See if you can let them go. And then walk your hands a little closer to your hips. Push down and back, which is going to lengthen your spine towards me. Again, notice where you feel it in your hips and see if you can let that go. So our body's instinct is to do what it thinks it needs to do to protect us. And a lot of times those messages have been crossed by past injuries or past habits. So when we're seated on the floor, we're safe. We're moving really slow. We're not doing any quick dynamic movements. So the body is safe. So sometimes having the mind convince the body, you know, you can let go of that. You're not really helping me here. By moving into those spaces where you feel tension and just convincing it to let go, it works. And if you felt that let go a little bit more, maybe you can bring your hands in front and start to crawl the hands forward. But we also have to be respectful of the body. So acknowledging those barriers, so not like barreling through them and forcing them, but more of that cajoling, like, hey, you're okay. I got us. You can let go. And I find that to be an effective method to convince the body that it's safe. So perhaps you can continue to fold forward. We did a lot of hip stabilization, hip strengthening, but what I always find interesting is the effect that that has on hip opening. And I think a lot of people come to yoga to get that nice, yummy, deep stretch. But if we're always just moving straight into the stretch and not stabilizing, we never actually find that full release. So hopefully you're finding that perhaps you can move a little deeper. When you're ready, walk your hands back up. Coming back into a seated position. Take your right hand outside of your right knee and lift your knee up. So now your heel is in line with your sit bone. You're going to take your left ankle and take it underneath and towards your right hip. The toe can point back so that your ankle is all in one line. If your hips are still tight, you can keep your right foot to the inside of your left knee, or you can take it to the outside of your left knee. But if you feel that your hips come off the floor too much, just step it back out. So I'd rather the pelvis stay grounded and you get more of a twist from the spine than the hips. So choosing your fit position, then take your hands, interlace, and hug, pull your knee towards your chest to lift up and out of your spine. So create some spinal length. Inhale here. As you exhale, turn your head towards your right shoulder. Continue to hold on to your shin with your left hand and bring your right hand behind your right hip. Take a breath in again. So lengthen through the crown of your head. So find that internal lift. As you exhale, turn your heart towards your right shoulder and let your head follow. You can move your arm crease, your left arm crease to the front of your shin to find more of that hug. You can stay with your hand or perhaps bring your elbow inside between your thigh and your chest and then take it to the outside of your knee. Relax your jaw, relax your tongue. Concentrate on the exhalation again. Notice where you grip. Have the conversation with your body that it's safe. And see if you can convince it to let go. And a twist for me, a lot of times that shows up in my neck and my throat. I cheat my breath a lot by breathing in my throat and my neck. And that shows up as clenching. So maybe it's there, maybe it's in the chest, maybe it's in the hips. Release. And switch. So bring your legs forward. This time taking your right foot to the outside of your left hip. Bringing your left heel closer. And noticing if you can keep your foot here or possibly to the outside of your right knee, wherever it needs to be that your pelvis can remain on the floor. Interlace your fingers with the opposite finger on top. Hug, knee towards chest, and inhale to grow tall. As you exhale, turn your head over your left shoulder. Keep holding your knee with your right hand. Take your left hand behind your hip, fingertips to the floor. As you press your fingertips down, grow tall again through the crown of your head. And then maybe you continue to hold onto your knee with your hand. Maybe you switch to elbow crease, or maybe you bring the elbow to the inside between thigh and chest, and then to the outside of your left knee. Use your breath to grow tall again, so lengthen your spine. As you exhale, rotate your heart towards your left shoulder, and then your head will follow. Focus on the exhalations. Breathing and twist can sometimes be challenging. And if we allow ourselves to fully let go, to exhale, you might find that the inhale comes more fully, more completely. Release back. Bring both feet out in front, lean back on your hands, and just twist your knees side to side. And notice the massage that your glutes are getting with this. I know that sometimes my hip focus can be rather challenging in the glutes, so you're welcome. And when you are ready, come down onto your mat, onto your. So we'll move into our posture. Your legs long. Allow your and allow your inhale, reach your arms over your head. Lengthen either by pointing your toes or reaching through your heels. And bend your knees, keeping your eyes closed and your head heavy. Roll over onto your side body. Take a couple of breaths here, just finding those final areas of where you need to let go. To pause before you take the next step. And then using your hands and your arms, slowly press yourself up to a seated position, eyes closed, head heavy. Bring your hands to rest at heart center, palms touch. As you inhale, lift your heart towards your hands. As you exhale, bow into the space of your heart. And acknowledge this time that you've made for yourself to pause, to slow down, to learn, to connect mind, body. And thanks so much for being here. Namaste.